your boy Osas, and in today's episode, we are going to get started with our chat reaction functionality. In the completed version of our project, when we jump into a chat room screen, when we actually long press on a chat message, we get this beautiful custom interactive animation that allows us to be able to react to a specific message and add contextual action to that specific message. And this is going to be powered by a combination of SwiftUI and UIKit animation. And I know that sounds complicated, but it's not, because we're going to break them down into the individual components, and we're going to do it step by step until we recreate this functionality. The first thing that I want us to bring our attention to is how the animation actually happens. So when we actually long press on a specific chat message, the first thing we actually do is we animate that message to the center of our screen, just slightly, right? And I'm going to be calling it I'm going to be breaking the animation into two different, parts. The first part, I'm going to call it translation. And the second part is animating out the remaining components. So this translation part just means we are moving this specific chat message from its original position to the center of the screen, as you can notice. So for example, when the message is at the bottom, if we long press on it, look at that, it animates it to the top, right? It moves the chat message to the top. And let's say, for example, if the message is at the top, like for example, this text, when we long press on it, it animates it down to the bottom. So, it animates from the top to the center. So it's pretty simple. That logic's pretty straightforward. We are just, changing the original position of the specific chat message that we're animating, and we're animating it to the center of the screen. The second part of our animation is once we're done animating to the center of the screen, we're going to be animating out this custom component, this reaction picker view component, which is going to be its own component, and this custom, context menu component. And so with that being said, let us jump into Xcode and cook up some logic. So now that I'm in my message list controller, okay, the first thing I want us to actually do before we start writing the logic that's going to power our animation is to be able to see chat messages inside of our preview. As you can see right now, our chat message is actually our preview is pretty empty. There's no stop data in here. And whenever you're building a complex interactive animation like that, you want to have a pretty tight feedback loop so you can see what you're doing. You can imagine it's just going to be a pain in the butt if we have to run the simulator every single time we make any tiny bit of change to our UI code. So I'm going to jump into our chat room view model, and I'm actually going to set up a stop data so we can see what we're doing in our SwiftUI preview. So I'm going to Command Shift and O, and I'm just going to jump into our chat room view model. Okay. And what do we want to do, guys? Well, let's go all the way to our initializer. So where are we actually fetching messages? You know what? We don't even care. What I really want to be able to do is I want something like if is in preview mode, something like that, right? Then I want to just load our messages with stop message. So something like, for example, I think we have the sent placeholder, what else do we have? Received placeholder. Do we only have two placeholder messages? It seemed like it. And yeah, it looks like, actually we have stop messages. Perfect. So I want to use the stop message to actually power our SwiftUI preview. Okay. And right now we don't have anything called, preview mode. So let's see. I'm just going to say it's preview mode. So I'm going to go up here and I'm just going to create a computer property really quickly. Thankfully, there's a way for us to actually know when we're in preview mode in Swift. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to say is preview mode. And let's just make it a Boolean computer property, right? And all we got to do is we're going to use the process info object, process info, and we're going to check the environment if we are actually in preview mode. And the key that we're going to use to access that is called Xcode _running _for previews. Okay. And we're going to say if that is equals to 1, then that means we are in preview mode. By the way, guys, I've already tested this. I use this a lot in my side project or in my project whenever I'm building anything and I want to load the preview with stop data. So right now, this is yelling at us and this needs to be a string. Okay, but that's really what we're trying to do. So now let's jump back to our message list controller. And why is this yelling at us? Message item has no, yes, it does. I'm just going to say message item dot stop messages. It should stop yelling at us now. Okay, let's jump back to our messages list controller, guys. And inside of our message list controller, let's resume our SwiftUI preview and let us see what is going to happen. So ideally, we should have those stop messages, but right now it's crashing, which should not be the case. And let's see what's going on really quickly, guys. And okay, let's jump back to our chat room view model. We have this is preview, and we're setting our messages to be equals to the stop messages. And the message list controller right now is what is the preview actually powered by? I'm going to say, okay, I think this has to do with our environment variable. I could be wrong here. So let's jump into our message list view. And let's jump into I'm going to say, okay, here. Let's jump into our chat room screen, Command Shift and O, chat room screen. So inside of our chat room screen, let's see what we're injecting. So it looks like, as you can see, we actually have this is perfect. We have our stub messages already popping up now. And it looks like the reason it's crashing, guys, is because of this environment variable. So we're passing in this voice message as an environment variable. And honestly, we could just go ahead and inject that inside of our chat room screen, or we could just pin this preview. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this preview. And let's jump back to our message list controller, and let's use that as our preview. So, yep, perfect. So the first thing we want to do, now that we're back to our actual functionality for this episode, is I want to use the deselect item to actually select the specific message that I want to animate. And so let's go ahead and scroll down to the deselect portion of our UI collection view delegate. So we have this deselect. I'm just going to go ahead and comment out everything in here just for now. Again, we're going to use this again. So please don't delete that code because it's going to be handy. I mean, not just handy, it's still functional code. I just want to use this deselect to be able to get the specific message. So really what I'm thinking here is when we select a specific item, right, I want to highlight the specific message that we have selected. Again, if we jump back to the simulator, what's really going on is, right, when we long press, we get this, animation, this translation. We animate it from its original position to the center of the screen, kind of, right? And I don't even want to handle the long press right now. I just want to get started with, let's just select a specific message and let's change the background color of the message we've selected. And then let's animate that message to the center of the screen. So that's what I'm trying to do right now. And so we're going to use the deselect. So the first thing we want to do is we need to get the specific cell. And by cell, that's the nomenclature for a list row, or for a row inside of a list in the UI collection view world. And so we need to get that specific cell. And all we're going to do is we're going to say godlet cell, or we could call it highlighted cell, selected cell. Actually, that's a better naming. We're going to say it's collection view dot cell for item at index path. We have an index path inside of our deselect, so I'm just going to pass in that index path. And let's see, we're just going to return out of the scope if we are unable to get that specific selected cell. So all I want to do now is I just want to change the selected cell's background color to red so we see what we are dealing with. So let's select the cell. Look at that. Beautiful. When we do that, beautiful, it selects the cell, right? It changes the background color. All right, that's the first part of the equation. The next thing I want us to do now is when we select the cell, I actually want to animate that cell to the center of our screen. And how are we going to do that, guys? Well, each view in UI collection view, right, has a center and a frame property. So we can say selected cell dot center, or we could just say dot, let's see, selected cell dot frame dot y, or actually dot center dot y is equals to view dot center dot y. And by view, I'm referring to this UI view controller that we're in. So the main base controller for our message list controller is a UI view controller. And you can think of a UI view controller just as a canvas that doesn't have a scroll view. It's just a canvas. And then inside of this UI view controller, we have this thing called a message collection view. The message collection view is the one that has a scroll view that allows us to be able to scroll. So all I'm saying is I want the selected item, the selected cell, I want the center of it to be the center of our canvas. And so let's roll back to our deselect logic and let's see what happens actually. When we click that, look at that. You notice that cell jumps all the way from that to the middle here, right? That's great actually, right? Obviously the animation is jumpy. It doesn't look like the way we want it to look, but we're going to go ahead and handle that one step at a time. Let's go back to our completed version of our project and let's actually, again, pay attention to what's really going on. So I'm going to toggle this into light mode, Command Shift and A to do that. Okay, so now when I actually long press this voice message, pay attention. Again, we animate to the center. When we're done animating to the center, we actually had a blur view, some sort of a blur view that blurs out everything else in the background and creates this focusing effect, right? And then when we dismiss it, the same thing happens. We remove the blur view, we animate the cell, right, the item back to its original position, and we hide everything else. So let's break this down step by step. Again, like I said, step one is translation. And we're making progress with translation. Although, as you can tell, when we actually select or try to animate the item to the center of the screen, you notice how it's like, when you're moving the actual item, it leaves an empty space. Obviously, we don't want that. And here's what we're going to do, guys. So right now, in the completed version of the project, it looks like we're actually animating the cell. And this is the beautiful thing about software engineering, right? Perception is reality. But this is just a perception. This is not the actual reality. The actual reality is we are actually hiding the original cell, the original item. So when I long press on this, we're actually hiding that, and then we're taking a screenshot of it, and it's that screenshot that we're actually animating. And again, we're going to go ahead and write the code for that, and you will see what I mean. So let's say we want to take a screenshot of the cell instead of actually animating the actual cell. How are we going to do that in UIKit? Well, thankfully, it's actually pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. We can actually use a snapshot. And here's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to get a snapshot cell. I'm just going to call it a snapshot view. Godlet snapshot view is equals to cell dot snapshot, or select a cell dot snapshot. So it's going to say snapshot after screenshot. It returns a snapshot of view based on the contents of the current view, which is exactly what we want. And let's pass in false. And let's see, else, let's return, because it's optional. It can return us a nil value. So what is snapshot view? It's just a UI view. Okay, perfect. So instead of animating or instead of trying to center the actual original cell, like I said, let's take it. We're taking a screenshot of it. Now let's animate that screenshot instead. So I'm going to animate the snapshot view to the center instead of actually animating the selected cell. Let's select our item. Okay, look at that. Interesting. Let's do this. Okay, I think that is not even having the effects that I really wanted to have. And I think I might need to add some sort of so let's select that again, select that again, select that again. It's not animating to the center. So what we need to do is to add a frame to the snapshot view, right? We need to tell the snapshot view, hey, here's your frame. And how are we going to add a frame to the snapshot view? Well, I'm just going to take the frame of our selected cell. So I'm going to say snapshot view, let's see, snapshot view.frame is equals to selected cell dot frame. And let's see what happens now. Let's select the item, select the item, select the selected cell. Okay, let us go out of this. This is not really having the effects that I am expecting it to. But let's go right ahead and debug this live together. Okay, so we have our snapshot view, which is good. Let's see, what do we want to do? We need to first and foremost store the frame of the selected cell. Actually, I think I'm getting way too ahead of myself. I'm going to comment out this frame and center logic. The first thing I want us to actually do is let us store the frame, the original position of the selected cell. By frame, I'm referring to the original position. So right here, before we select it, what is the original position right as we select it, right? Let's store this original position. Because again, remember, we're going to need to move this to the center. So we're going to go up here and we're just going to store it. We're going to call it starting frame, or we could call it original position. Doesn't really matter. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create a new marker for my custom animation. I'm just going to call it custom, reactions properties. And what do we want? So let's create a private property and let's just call it starting frame. I think that's a good name, meaning what's the original frame of our selected cell, right? And we're just going to call it, it's going to be of type CGRect, and CGRect contain position and rectangles and all that cool stuff. Let's scroll all the way back down to our, did select item. Now, inside of our selected cell, let's go right ahead and say, let's think here for a second. So I'm going to say starting frame is going to be equals to, I want the cell dot super view, or actually selected cell dot super view, okay, dot convert to, and let's see, I want to convert to the selected cell dot frame. I don't care about the coordinates, so I'm going to pass in nil. So this is our starting frame, okay? So now that we have our starting frame, and this is yelling at us because we're not using it, don't worry, we're going to use you. Just a second. So we're storing our original frame, we're storing the starting position, and we can actually validate that by printing this really quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what I mean. Let us print our starting frame, and let's just say starting frame dot origin dot y, the y position across the vertical axis. So let's go ahead and select an item. Look at that. You see that 144? That's the starting frame for this. What about this one? 450. As you can tell, they have different positions. And this one, 97. So we're properly storing the starting position for our cell. So now that we have our starting frame, what do we want to do with our starting frame? Well, let us go ahead and create, like I said, some sort of we already have a snapshot view. Now I would like for us to create another view, which is going to act as a focused view, as the base container for, what we're going to actually animate. And I'm going to call this a focused view. And focused view is just going to be a UI view, okay? And it's going to ask for a frame. And guess what the frame is going to be, guys? Starting frame, exactly. And I'm going to go ahead and default this to 0 if the starting frame is nil, but the starting frame should never be nil because we have it right here, okay? So what do I want to do with this focused view? Well, the focused view is actually what we are going to animate, guys. So I think that's where I made a mistake. Instead of trying to animate the snapshot view directly, the focused frame or the focused view is what I'm going to animate. So I'm going to say, focused view, first and foremost, let's change the background color of our focused view to something like yellow. And what do we want to do next? Now we want to animate our focused view. We need to add it to our sub view. So I'm going to anchor. So really what's going on if I exit out of Xcode and let's go back to our completed version and let's break it down some more. So when we long press, like I said, we're taking a snapshot. We're animating that snapshot of a cell to the center of the screen. But remember, this is UIKit. Where are we adding these objects as subviews? Well, we're actually adding it to the window of our application, to the UI window of our application, okay? And so let's go ahead and do that. So we need to add this focused view, not just to the view controller, but like to the window of the entire application. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to get the window. I'm just going to say godlet window is going to be UI window scene. And I'm going to say the current. Remember, we created this current computer property a while ago. You could jump into it to find it. It's an extension on the UI window scene object. So I'm going to go back into our message list controller. And now that we have our current, we're going to say the key window, okay, else return out of this scope because we don't even have anything to anchor our views to. So window, am I spelling window correctly? I am not. Window, and I'm going to change this to a lowercase. Okay, or we could just call this key window, to be honest. I think that's a better name actually, key window. Okay, so that's the key window of our application. So the next thing I want us to do now is we're going to say, let's see, we're going to say key window, the add subview, right? The add subview part is going to be, what do we want to add first? Actually, the first thing we want to add, guys, is our blur view. So again, notice when I long press on this, we have that blur view pop up right away, and then we animate to the center. So let us go ahead and create a blur view object. And our blur view is going to be super simple. It's just going to be a UI visual effect view. This is a UI kit view. And so I'm going to go above just right below our focused view, and I'm going to create a blur view. And I think that's a good name, right? Yeah, that's a good name. Blur view is going to be a UI visual effect view, and visual effect view take in effects, which is a UI visual effect. And the visual effect, I'm just going to call it blur effect. And the blur effect is going to be a UI blur effect. And the style that I want is let's just pass in regular blur effect, and then let's pass in that blur effect into our UI visual effect view. So with that being done, now let's go ahead and add our blur view to our key window. So with the blur view added to the key window, we need to add some sort of a frame to the blur view, okay? And what is the blur view's frame going to be? It's just going to be the entire key window, because in the completed version of the project, as you can tell, the blur view spans the entire screen width and height. And the key window is the same thing as that. It's the entire key, the entire width and height of our phone. So we're just going to say blur view dot frame is just going to be key window dot frame. Now let's go ahead and select our item. We should blur everything out. Let's see what happens. Look at that, guys. That's perfect. We have a blur view, right? And of course, if we tap it, we're not really dismissing it yet. We're going to handle that in just a bit. So the next thing we want to do is, after we've added our blur view, we want to have that snapshot above our blur view, right? I think that makes sense. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to add another key window, another sub view to our key window. And what is this next sub view going to be? Well, this is going to be focused view. Okay. So what is the focused views? Let's see. What's the focused views frame going to be, guys? Well, the focused view frame, let's just make it focused view. The frame is going to be equals to, let's see, what do we want our focused view frame to be? Actually, what we want is not even the focused view frame pattern. It's actually our focused view center, because remember, our focused view already has the starting frame, meaning it already has the frame of the selected cell right here. Because when we create the UI view, we're passing in the starting frame as the frame for our focused view. So really what we want is, we want to know, this is where we're going to center it. What is our focused view center going to be? And I'm just going to say center.y, which means I want to center it across the vertical axis. And it's just going to be our key window, which we're just referring to our phone's, vertical, our phone screen at this point. And I'm just going to say key window.center.y. And let's go ahead and select an item, and let's see what happens. So when we select an item, look at that, guys, we get this yellow block. Do you notice that? Right? And remember, the key window is this beautiful yellow block right here. So I'm going to go ahead and actually turn off the background color of our selected cell, just so we can see what we're doing. And of course, right now, everything is still jumpy. We're going to add animation in just a little bit, the UI kit animation. That's just going to make this smooth. And so we're animating stuff to the center of the screen, which is great. And the reason I'm breaking this down step by step is so you sort of understand what's going on. It's not really magic. We're just moving things around. We're just hiding things and animating things to the center of the screen. So again, if we select, let's say, for example, this voice message, look at that. It animates it to the center of the screen. And I want you to pay attention to something. It's actually getting the actual height of the selected message correctly. And why is that? Because again, remember, we have the starting frame, which is getting the height, the width, and the position of the item that you selected. And this is what's responsible for that. Okay. And that starting frame is our focused views frame. Okay. So let's say, for example, I select this just to refresh my preview. And let's say I select this tiny eye there. The height should be small. Look at that, pretty small. And the width is spanning the entire width of the screen, which is okay. That's what we want. We just focus on the height and the actual position across the y-axis. So now that we have that working, what do we want to do next? Well, I would like to add an actual cell to the specific focused view, right? That makes sense. So like the selected cell, I want to add that to the focused view, this yellow background. Okay, how are we going to do that? Well, we need to add a subview to this focused view. So I'm going to go focused view, let's add subview. And what is the subview going to be? Well, it's going to be our snapshot view. Okay, so now that we've added our snapshot view, we need to add a frame to our snapshot view. And I'm just going to say snapshot view dot frame. What is our snapshot view's frame going to be? Well, it's just going to be our focused view dot bounce. And let's go ahead and select our item. Look at that, guys. Boom, we have a specific selected message. And again, frame bounds concept are very much UI kit coordinate system concept. And so like frame, it's its XY coordinate position in relation to the parent, while bounds, it's the XYZ coordinate position in relation to itself. So right here, when I say the snapshot view's frame is equals to focused view to bounds, you can just imagine it as me saying, I want this background, this yellow background color. I want, the XY, I want this snapshot view. And by the snapshot view, I'm referring to this, the snap selected cell. I want the position to be equals to my focused view's position. That's really what all of this is. So let's go ahead and run this again, and let's see what happens. Let us try hi there. Look at that. We get the hi there text. Super jumpy, but that's okay, guys. We are making great progress. And I love animation so much, guys. this is like one of the big features I was super excited to build with you guys. And the reason is because by the time we break it down step by step, you're really going to get what's going on. And so we're actually getting the selected cell, which is great, right? We're jumping into we're animating it or translating it using UIKit terminology to the center of the screen, which is perfect. The next step that we need to do, guys, is to actually animate it. Because right now we're just like, we have this jumpiness, right? And we're going to go ahead and animate it really quickly. And so let's see. So the snapshot cell, or we could call it snapshot cell instead of snapshot view. I think I'm going to call it snapshot cell. So it's just more naming consistently. And snapshot cell. Let's see, I'm going to call this snapshot cell in the subview and snapshot cell. Because again, remember the snapshot cell is just the selected cell. It's like we're taking a screenshot of the selected cell. And it's not a screenshot of the entire screen, it's just a screenshot of the specific selected item that you selected. So that's perfect. Okay, so what do we need to do next? Like I said, we need to animate it. And it's pretty simple. We have a way to animate things in UIKit. This is the UIKit animation section of our logic. And I'm just going to call the UIKit class, I'm going to say animate. And we have this animation with spring, with opacity, with spring and delay and duration and all that cool stuff. And I'm going to use this one right here that says spring. And I'm going to click on Alt so I can get all of the options. And so the duration is like, how long do we want the animation to be? I already know what the duration is going to be because I've already experimented with this, but feel free to also experiment with this as well on your own. I'm going to use 0.6. For delay, I'm going to use 0 because I want it to happen instantaneously. For spring, this is like how jumpy it is, right? And I'm going to use 0.7. For initial velocity, let's keep it consistent at 1. And then for options, this is like, what sort of animation do we want? There's multiple options. I'm going to use curve ease in, and you can look at it explained right here. The ease in basically causes the animation to start very slowly. So the animation is going to start slowly, and then as it gets towards the end, it's going to speed up, okay? And I think you can notice that when we go out of the project. Let's see the selected version of our project, or by selected, I mean completed version of our project. When we long press, it actually starts slowly, and then towards the end, you notice it springs. It's very subtle, and the way I'm making that happen is by using this curve ease in logic. And so this curve ease in animation option, so I'm going to say curve ease in, and then this is my animation block, this is my completed block. And to be frank, I don't even need a completed version of the block, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove the completed version, the completed closure. All I want is this animation closure. So the way UIKit animation works is we have this UI view animate block, and then we just set whatever we want to animate inside of here if the property is animatable. So things like, opacity, frame, bounds, those are all things that we can animate in position. And this is a closure. We need to break the retain cycle, so I'm going to say weak self again because we are good developers. And let's go ahead and actually animate things now. And let's see, this is yellow to us. I'm going to say weak self in the specific closure. Okay, so there's no strong references. Let's go back to our animation. What do we want to animate to prevent this from being super jumpy? Pretty simple. All of this frame, because remember, frame is an animatable component. I don't know if it says it right here. If we read the documentation, you might have to jump deeper into the documentation, but I know frames are animatable. So I'm going to copy this frame code, and I'm going to paste it in this animation block. And I'm going to remove the space. And let's go ahead and select a specific item now, and let's see what happens. So let's select this item. Look at that. Boom. Jumps out, right? Beautiful. Do you see that? Do you see that? We are making some great progress, guys. Let's try it again. Select I there. Boom. We jump. Obviously, we notice something going on in the background right there, and we're going to fix that in a little bit. And let's see it again. Boom. Okay, and sometimes the preview is not necessarily the best way to know if your animation is working as well, but I like using the preview for, tight feedback loop. Let's actually run our project on the simulator, and let's again select an item and actually see what it looks like, because right now in the simulator it looks like we have some sort of a weird behavior. In the preview we have some sort of a weird behavior, but let's see what the simulator actually does. So let's jump into a channel and wait for the simulator to boot up, and then we jump into a channel. Come on, let's jump into a channel. Let's go right here. Let's select this message. Look at that, guys. Isn't that beautiful, right? Okay, perfect. It looks like that animation is indeed consistent, and there's something going on with our animation block. And okay, let's go ahead and fix that. So the first thing I want us to do is the focused view. I'm going to remove this yellow background color because, quite frankly, we don't need that, that yellow background color for our focused view. I just added that to highlight what's really going on, right? So we have a selected cell, we take a screenshot of the cell, we have a focused view, and the focused view, I'm just calling it focused view, but like it's really just a base container that holds the screenshot, and that is using the original position, right? And then we're animating the position to the center of the screen by using our key window. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out this focused view, the background color. Let's select an item now. Let's see what happens. We get that. Okay, I think what's really going on, guys, is our blur view. So we're creating our blur view right up here. And the minute we create our blur view, it's already visible. So I would actually like to animate out our blur view. So let me leave out this yellow background color again, just to show contrast of what's going on. So I'm going to say blur view, which is our visual effect view. I'm going to say alpha is 0. So right here where we're initializing our blur views and the effect, let's turn it to 0. For example, if we select the item now, look at that, right? You see what's going on. Again, let me refresh the preview. I think this is important for you to really see what's going on because the perception is different from what's actually going on. That's the point I'm trying to make. And let's select this item. Look at that. So we take a screenshot, we animate out that screenshot, and without a blur view, you can see what's really going on. And so let's animate in our blur view now. So I'm going to put the blur view up here, and right in here, I'm going to say blur view.alpha is now going to be 1. So let's show the blur view while we're animating out our selected cell or our snapshot cell. So let's click on this, look at that. Okay, let's try this again. I'm going to try this again, select that. We're still getting that sort of like closure. I don't really like that. I'm not sure what's going on yet, but I'm sure we're going to fix it. Let's just take things one step at a time. So the next thing I want us to do is to, let's see, could he be the selected cell? Maybe I need to like hide the selected cell as well. So let me go ahead and actually hide the selected cell as well. I'm going to say selected cell, the alpha is equals to 0. And let's see what happens. When I select that, it still does it. Okay, I'm going to remove that. Let us continue with our logic for this episode. We're going to go ahead and fix that bug eventually. So we're animating our cell. That is awesome. That's pretty much the logic when you think about it, right? And of course, we need to have the long press gesture functionality, but we're selecting it, we're animating it out. Now let us dismiss it. So ideally, when you click on this blur view, or anywhere around this blur view or focused view, what we want to do is to animate back our cell, right? So if we go back to the completed version of our project, when we long press on an item, right, we bring this out. We're in this first version of our logic, which is like animating it from the original position to the center of the screen. But when we select the blur view, look at that, it dismisses it and it animates it back to its original position. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a function underneath of our dismiss, of our deselect, and I'm just going to call it, what's a good function? I'm going to call it dismiss context menu, dismiss context menu. And the goal is we want to use this to dismiss, when we select this blur view, we want to like, animate things back to their original position. And so we're going to be using a UI tab gesture to make that happen. Remember our blur view, we could just add a tab gesture to our blur view and then trigger that tab gesture to actually dismiss our animation. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to go up to, where's our blur view? Right here. So we're going to create a UI tab gesture recognizer. I'm going to say let tab gesture. Again, this might look like foreign language, but it's really not that complicated. We're just using UI kit here. This is like the equivalent of a SwiftUI tab gesture. And so we're going to say tab gesture. It's going to ask for a target and an action. The target, we're going to say self because we're referring to the class we're in. And the selector is the actual action that we want to fire. And so the action is, we might need to go mark our dismiss context menu. We need to mark that with Objective-C, OBJC. Okay, let's take dismiss context menu, pop it right here in our selector, and let's add this tab gesture to our blur view. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to say blur view, and we need to access the content view. So the blur view have content view. If you try to add the tab gesture directly to the, could you do that? It looks like you could, but honestly, I'm going to go with the content view of the blur view, and then I'm going to add a gesture recognizer to that content view. So I'm going to say blur view, the content view that had gesture recognizer, and we're just going to add the tab gesture that we just created. And just like that, if we go ahead and put a print statement inside of our dismiss context menu function, you're going to see what's going to happen. So let's put a print statement in here. Let's select an item. Okay, let's expand the console a little bit more so you see what I'm doing. Let's select the blur view. What's going on? It's not doing anything. Oh, okay, yeah, this is UI kit. This is peak UI kit right here, guys. We need to turn on the user interaction of our content view. So we're going to say blur view, the content view that is user interaction enabled is equals to true. And do I need to move this above the, I might need to move this before I had the gesture recognizer. So let's go ahead and click an item. Let's select our blur view, and let me select previews, and let me dismiss this. Let's select that. Awesome. So we're getting dismiss context menu. So now when we select anywhere out of here, right, we want to dismiss our context menu. But what happens when we select the focused view? You notice the print statement is now firing. So let's go ahead and fix that. And the way I'm just going to fix that is I'm just going to disable the user interaction of this focused view, right? The reason I'm doing that is because I want, when a user taps on even this section of our view, I want it to still dismiss. And the way I'm going to do that is by just disabling the user interaction. And so that way the blur view is going to pick up the interaction. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to say, let's see, our focused view. So where's our focused view? It's right up here. Right up here, I'm just going to say focused view dot is user interaction enabled is equals to false. And let's select an item. Okay, perfect. Let's select this. Look at that. It still fires the dismiss context menu. Dismiss context menu. What about this item? Dismiss context menu. So awesome. So now the goal is when we select this dismiss context menu, we want to remove everything. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do it step by step. The first step is really just to like, remove the focus view, animate it back to its original position, right? And then we need to remove the blur view. And I'm just going to wrap everything inside of a UI view animation block as well from the beginning. So we're going to say UI view, the animates. And honestly, we're going to be using the same logic. So I might as well go ahead and copy this animation block right here, put it down here, and I might need to change the durations a little bit. So for the spring dampen, I'm going to use 0.8. And again, these figures are just figures that I came up on my own while building the course. Please feel free to like play with it if you want a different animation style. So I'm going to use curve ease out this time around. And now let's go right ahead and actually fix things. So as you can see, all of these properties are yelling at us because we're inside of our dismiss context menu method now. And when we're referring to blur view, this method does not have a blur view, and the class itself, the message list controller, does not have a blur view. So what we need to do to be able to animate out is we need to store all of these properties that we're creating here. And by all of these properties, I mean like Let me expand this a little bit just so we have more spacing so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So I mean, like the focused view, we need to store it. The blur view, we need to store it, because think about it, right? We are storing the starting frame on the message list controller. So let's go ahead and store the focused view and all of these other cool stuff as well. So I'm just going to command and jump into a starting frame. And right here, I'm going to create one for focused view. So actually, let's create one for blur view. So I'm going to say guard private var blur view, right? Is going to be of UI visual effect view, UI visual effect view. Spelling is not my forte. All right, so let's create one for focused view as well, and that's going to be of type UI view. We're going to make it optional because we just want to store it on the message list controller. So now that we have those three properties started up here, let's go assign them inside of our DSelect method. So right here inside of our DSelect method, so we're creating a focused view right here. We could just come down here and say, and honestly, instead of like creating a focused view here, we could just say, actually, yeah, we could just say focused view. Let's remove the let. Just say focused view is equals to, so we're assigning it right here. It's going to yell at us because focused view is now optional. So I'm going to go ahead and unwrap it. I'm going to say God let focused view else return out of the scope if we don't have a focused view. And we should, because we're assigning it right up here. So that way that prevents us from having to like unwrap it, like put optionals all over the place. Let's do the same thing for our blur view. So instead of saying let blur view, we're just going to say blur view, because again, remember, we have blur view on a property level, on a class level, I mean. And let's also unwrap our blur view, because again, it's going to yell at us if we have to do it without the guard statement. It's going to have optionals all over the place, and it's just messy. So let's just unwrap our blur view right below where we assign it. We're going to say guard blur view is equals to blur view, else return. I don't even think we need to say it's equals to. We could just say guard blur view, or guard let blur view, and it's just going to know that we are referring to unwrapping it. Okay, so that all that should go away now, which is perfect. And now we have access. We're going to have access to our blur view, to our focused view. And do we need access to our snapshot cell? Not really, because the snapshot cell is actually a child view of the focused view. So it's the focused view that we actually want to remove. So when we select this yellow view is what we want to remove. So long as we remove this yellow background, this yellow view from our sub view, from our screen, we don't really care about the message cell, because the message cell is going to be removed as well, because it's the child view of the focused view. So let's go ahead and write the logic for this dismiss context menu. So we've written out our animation logic, and I could create this a new line just so it's a little bit more readable. Dismiss, delay, initial spring, options. Okay, I think that's a little bit more readable. I'm going to indent this really quickly. And what do we want to do? Well, we're going to do this step by step. The first thing we want to remove is we want to animate our focused view back to its original position. Again, when I do this in a completed version, when I select this, we animate that back to its original position, and we hide the blur view. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say focused view. And by focused view, I'm referring to the class level focused view now. But because I don't want to use optionals, I'm just going to unwrap this as well. God let self is equals to self, else return. Because I don't want to use check marks all over the place, question marks all over the place. I mean, so now I'm going to say God focus view the transform, and by transform, actually, do we need transform yet? No, we don't need transform yet. That's going to come in another episode. So I just want to say focused view, the frame of the focus view is what I want to do, and the frame is just going to be the starting frame, because remember, when we selected a specific item, we actually store the original position. So we're just going to say this focus view, this yellow background, return back to your original position. That's what this is doing right here, and this is yelling at us because focused view is what? Okay, let's just default it to 0. Who cares? And let's see. So when we select this and we select this, you notice it returns back to the position, guys, which is awesome. Let me reload this really quickly. Let's say we select this item, we animate out. When we select our blur view, look at that. It animates back to the original position, but of course, we're now removing the blur view. So let's go ahead and actually remove the blur view. So how are we going to remove the blur view? Very simply, we're just going to say, blur view the alpha is equals to 0. And let's see what we're doing. Let's select this. Let's select this. Look at that, guys. We just returned back to the original position. But obviously, there's a bug going on right now, and I'm going to show you what's really going on. Because remember, the focused view contains a snapshot. So if we scroll, you see that blur view, that focused view is still hanging on the screen because it's not a cell. It's a screenshot. So we need to remove the screenshot totally from our, from our entire screen. And the way we're going to do that is I'm just going to add a completion handler. So animation blocks have this completion handler, which is just like when the animation is completed, if you want to do more things, you add that piece of code in that specific block or that closure. So in this case, all I want to do is just say let's see. I want to say self.blur view. I just want to remove it from super view. Remove from super view. And that's just going to remove it from the entire screen. And the super view in this case is our key window, because remember, we're adding it as a sub view right up here. This focused view and our blur view, we're adding as a sub view as our key window. So when we say remove from super view, it means we want it to remove from the key window. And this is yelling at us because we probably need to, this is just a syntax issue. We need to pass in the completed, but we don't care. It will come with a completed Boolean, but we don't care. We just want it to fire. So let's see. Let's go ahead and select an item. Select this. And why didn't it remove the blur view, guys? Self.blur view. It's removing the blur view, which is great. Yeah, it is removing the blur view, but we need to remove the focused view. Yes, so we need to say self, the focused view, which is the yellow background. We want to remove that view from the super view as well, which is from the key window. Remove from super view. Let's go ahead and select an item. Let's select out. And look at that. It disappears out, right? Let's select an item. Let's select out. You notice that? Beautiful. What about this? Select an item, select out, it removes it. And obviously, there's still a lot of junkiness. There's still a lot of weird behaviors going on. And let's go ahead and handle that one step at a time. But we're making great progress, guys. And please give yourself a pat on the back. This is a complex interactive animation, and we're almost done with it. We're making really good progress. We're almost done with the first part of the animation. So again, if we select this, we get our animation out. We select out, we get that. Obviously, you notice some jumpiness going on. And really what I would like for us to do is actually very simple. So when we select a cell, I would like for us to store that cell on the property level. I would like for us to store it as some sort of a highlighted cell or selected cell, whatever you want to call it, right? And then I would like for us to also hide that cell. So I would like for us to say like the cell's alpha should be 0, right? And that way, when we deselect, when we want to hide our animation, right, we're just going to remove the focused view and then we're going to animate out the selected cell again. And so let's go ahead and store that selected cell. And this is yelling at us because we're not actually using the weak self. I'm just going to remove it because we're not referring to any class level property in here. We're referring to properties inside of this method. And I'm going to remove the int as well. Okay, so like I said, I want to store the selected cell somewhere. And where am I going to store that? And I'm just going to go all the way up again. I'm just going to command and click into the starting frame. And I'm going to create another property and private var. I'm just going to call it selected cell. Or we could call it highlighted cell. It doesn't matter. And it's just going to be a UI collection view cell. Again, a cell is each of these individual items that you're seeing here. This is a cell, this is a cell, this is a cell. So you can think of it as a row inside of a list or an item inside of a list. And so we're going to take this this selected cell. We're going to store it whenever we select it. So let me scroll all the way down here. And I think I'm just going to store it right here. After we do our blur view.alpha is equals to 0, I'm just going to say selected cell is equals to, I'm just going to say self, well, let's call it highlighted cell. So it's different. Yeah, let's call it highlighted cell just so it's slightly different all the way up here. Naming is always hide, my guys. Highlighted cell. And let's scroll all the way back down. And let's say highlighted cell is equals to our selected cell. Okay, remember our selected cell is right up here. That's the actual item that we're selecting. So now that we say highlighted cell is equals to selected cell, what do I want us to do? Well, I would like for us to do something like highlighted cell dot alpha is equals to 0. So we're just hiding it. So let's go ahead and select thins and let's hide thins back. Look at that. It disappears, right? There's nothing in that specific position anymore, which is great, right? Which is great because now once we dismiss it, we want to animate it back out. So let's try this real quick. Let's select this one, go back, right? The focused view disappears, but we need to animate the cell back out. And that is super light work, guys. All we got to do is jump into our dismiss context menu method. And inside of here, we're going to say, let's see, what do we need to do? So we're going to say something like selected cell is equals to 1, but I only want to do that upon completion, right? As it's about to remove the blur view. That's the only time I want to do that. So I'm going to say self highlighted cell dot alpha. I want to make it visible now. So I'm going to say the alpha is equals to 1. Okay. And so let's see what happens. Let's select this. Let's remove this. Look at that. Boom. Let's select this. Remove it. Boom. But you get what's going on, guys. It's a perception, right? We're taking a screenshot. We animate that screenshot to the center of the screen. When we dismiss it, right, we show the original cell back, and then we remove the screenshot. And so with this perception, we get this nice, beautiful looking animation, and it's pretty awesome, guys. Let's try that again. Try that again. That's awesome. So the next thing I want us to actually do is I want to remove this cell because remember this highlighted cell is a reference to a UI collection view cell. So I would like to nail that out. I would like to clear that. You can think of it as like, clearing references. Clearing references. So this is basically just animating out references, right? And to clear references, all I want to do is selected cell or highlighted cell. That's what we call it. I'm going to say the highlighted cell is equals to nil. And what else do we want to do? I'm going to also say self.blurView is equals to nil. I want to nail out all of these variables, and I'm going to say self.focusedView is equals to nil. Because remember, this is like when we select this, let's say we select this, when we're actually done with that animation, when we dismiss it back to its original position, I want to remove all of those references because you don't want all these memories just hanging around there. And so we're clearing out our references. And the next thing for us to do really quickly is to figure out why this blur view, why that initial blur view is acting the way it's acting. And let's see if we can debug that really quickly. And that's going to be it for this episode after that. So I think what's actually going on is a blur view right here. It looks like we're hiding it inside of our blur view frame. It looks like we're hiding it inside of our UI view animate block. And so if you look at this, we say blur view, the frame is equals to key window, the frame. I think that's what's causing that swiping like animation or effect. Like when we select an item, you notice it almost looks like a page. And so let's move this key window, this blur view frame out of that because we don't actually want to animate it. We only want to animate, for example, the blur view visibility, the alpha, and we want to animate the focused view centerness and the snapshot cell centerness. So I'm going to move that frame up to, let's see, I'm going to move it below, just right above the UI view animate block. And this is one of the beautiful things about, like building applications in general. Every little detail matters. And so let's go ahead and see if this actually fixes our issue. When we select the cell, look at that. We no longer have that swiping effect. Again, let me move this. I'm going to comment this out just to show it to you again. Let's say we move it above the alpha. We're setting the blur view frame. We're saying it's equals to the entire screen's height and width. And when we animate it, it gives it that animation. Obviously, we don't want that animation. That's not part of our logic. And so we're moving it outside of the animation block. We're just telling it, just set it as the frame. Don't animate it. And when we click on it now, look at that. We get that beautiful animation, guys. Look at that. Boom. And let's see, what about this? Boom. We select that. Boom. What if we scroll all the way to, let's say we're barely visible, and we just select this. It moves it to the center, moves it back. What about this? Let's say, for example, we select that. That looks so beautiful, guys. I could play with this all day. That is masterful UI animation. Let's, of course, remove that yellow background just so we see what it actually looks like. So I'm going to comment out the focus to view background color is equals to yellow. And let's select our item. Look at that. When we select out, it animates to the back. Let's select our item. Look at that. Remove that, animates it out. Just to prove a point, what's really going on, I'm going to change the background color of our selected cell to red so you see what happens. And let's change the background color of the focused view to yellow as well so you see the effect or what's actually causing that perception. And so when we select an item, we have the yellow. When we remove it, notice the red comes in now, right? Remove that, the red comes back in. So really, again, what's really going on is, let me remove this yellow color, make sure everything is working, and I'm going to give it one final explanation before we wrap up this episode. So what's really going on is when we select an item, right, we first get the position of the item we've selected, and we're calling it starting frame. We get that position, we store it on a class, on our class, which is the message list controller. And the reason we're storing it out inside of the class is so that we can access it from our dismiss context menu method. So once we get our position of the selected item, we take a screenshot of the item that we have selected. And the way we do that is through the snapshot view method. When we're done with that, we go right ahead and, of course, set up tab gesture. We set up our blur view, and then we had our blur view frame. So when we select this item, we had our blur view to the frame of our entire application. And that's where we're doing it right here. Blur view to frame is equals to key window to frame. And then we go right ahead and animate the position of the focused view. So the focused view is sort of like a container that helps us animate the screenshot that we just took. And that's really what's going on, guys. In the next episode, we are going to deal with, this other version or this other section of the animation. Like I said, I wanted to split it into two different sections. The first section is the translation section, which just means to move it to the center of the screen, right? We're animating the position to the center of the screen and then animated it back. The second set of the animation is we want to animate out this reaction picker view component and this custom context menu component. And of course, we're going to be using a SwiftUI animation for these, SwiftUI animations for this. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and run our project on the simulator to make sure everything is working as expected. And that's going to be it for this episode, guys. So let's wait for everything to compile. It's doing its thing. Let's jump into a channel and let's see the beautiful work we just did, guys. And I'm waiting for the simulator to compile. Let's jump right here. Let's jump into this channel and let's just select an item. Look at that, guys. Boom. And you notice the beautiful thing about this is the reason this is not animating so jankily is because we're using that UI kit animation. What about this? It springs out, it springs back in. What about this? It springs out, springs back in. What about selecting this? Springs back in. What if we select out here? Beautiful, 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 beautiful. So like I said, in the next episode, we're going to have the reaction picker view component, which is just this bad boy that actually allows us to be able to react to a message. And we're also going to have the custom context menu components. And of course, we're going to do all the other work that we need to do to make everything match the completed version of the project. Thank you for watching as always, guys. I really appreciate it. Please, please, please like and subscribe. Guys, like if you can't like and subscribe for content that is this free and this premium, I don't know what to say, man. It takes a lot of work and effort to write code like this, record it, and give it away for free. Like, please, that really means a lot to me, keeps me motivated. So like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode where we're going to keep building this cool animation. Peace.